So Rachel Reeves has been exposed as breaking local council law after renting out her family home without a license. It's all over the news and it is getting pretty common at the moment to hear about this, as you can see. So in today's video, we're going to run over what exactly happened, why I think she fell foul of these rules, her problem with this on an optics point of view being that she's actually one of the people who pushed for these laws to be put into place, and then her just repeated inadequacy in general and what's actually going to happen in a broader political view from this little scandal that Labour have fallen foul of. So from the Telegraph here, you can see pretty quickly, it's clear cut. Rachel Reeves has broken housing rules by letting out her family home without a license. She did it without obtaining a rental license in her home in southeast London. The council there requires little landlords to do that on these selective bases. She sent a letter to the Prime Minister. She said she's sincerely sorry for doing this. And it's all sort of emerged from there. Now, I would love to say that there's more to this scandal than that, but that's literally it, right? She had a family home. She moved into 11 Downing Street, where the Chancellor lives when they're in office. And so she rented out her family home for £3,200 per month after becoming Chancellor. She was supposed to apply for a license under that local Labour council law, but she just didn't. Now, to be clear, I don't think this was malicious. Right? Apparently, it only costs £900 for one of these licenses in this region of East Dulwich. I have been a landlord in the past as well, so I understand that with lettings fees on top, maybe it would end up being something like £2,000 to get this sorted. You know, you need an EICR or an EPC survey done. So maybe she saves £2,000 from doing this, but she's been in power for 16 months now. I think the total amount of rent she's collected has been just under £60,000. So doing that to save £2,000, I don't think this was malicious, but I do think that she must have done something really wrong to make this mistake. And what I mean by that, again, is that I've been a landlord, and every letting agent I've ever worked with in multiple different towns and cities around the UK, they've all followed the rules very closely. The letting agents are really quite stringent. They make sure that I have my EICR certificates. They make sure that if there's an Article 4 direction in the area where the house is, that I am allowed to rent out my property, because I used to have a student home, that I have my EPC certificate as well. I've never rented out a property somewhere I need a license from the local council to do that, but I'm pretty sure it would be a very, very similar situation. So my honest to God question for Rachel Reeves is, how did you actually manage to let out your house for 18 months without knowing about those rules? Did she just not bother to look into it and let it out privately without the help of a letting agency? Or did she have someone else, one of her staff, set it up for her and she just didn't really care? Or has she used a dodgy letting agent that didn't really follow the rules? It must be one of those things there, because in general, the regulations in this industry in the UK are pretty ridiculous. And anyone who works within the letting industry, renting out homes as an agent, well, you know all these laws, especially for your local area. So I don't really understand how she made this mistake in the first place. Now, the next big problem with Rachel Reeves is that actually she is the cause in many cases of laws like this in the United Kingdom. Yes, she's the Chancellor, but that doesn't mean that she keeps her beak out of local housing law or anything like that. And I'm here showing you a tweet that she put out on the 20th of October. I'm recording this on the 30th. This was 10 days ago that she put out this tweet. I welcome Leeds City Council's decision to expand their selective landlord licensing policy to include the Armley area. Whilst many private landlords operate in the right way, we know that lots of private tenants in Armley face problems with poorly maintained housing. This scheme means that private landlords in the area will be required by law to obtain a license for any residential property they're seeking to let, and they must meet certain standards to ensure the property is safe and in a decent state of repair. So once again, we see that this is literally a lawmaker being a lawbreaker. And for her to claim that she didn't know that the local council had this law stating that actually, yes, you need to be licensed, does ring a little bit false and hollow, considering how just 10 days ago she's celebrating on Twitter that another local council has put into place this law. It doesn't really make sense. And there's definitely something going on here that we don't really know. Now, one of the big issues with Rachel Reeves in general is that actually she's just rather unimpressive as a person and has a pretty horrific track record as far as, being a politician or just any kind of success goes. In reality, her only success is climbing the Labour Party and just sort of falling upwards, right? She's just been caught out in this scandal where she's been illegally renting out her home without a license. And I want to make a point about that as well. I'm seeing a lot of left-wing media outlets saying that she broke the rules by not getting a license to rent out her home. Let's be perfectly clear. When there are rules which are set in place by the government and enforced by the authorities, that's not a rule, that is a law. So yes, she did illegally rent out her home, and she did break the law as well. She hasn't just broken like some kind of rule that was, down her street or with a little, homeowners arrangement in her little local area. She broke the law with this. So we've had that scandal blow up. She's also been caught out lying on her CV about working in investment banking when in reality, she was a low-level, non-economics, non-policy-related employee at a consumer bank. But on her CV, she's claimed that she was like an investment banker, one of these really talented, educated people who works in the City of London and has earned the right to say, oh, I think that this will happen if I raise taxes on this because of economic theory. She was just basically in customer service in this consumer bank and has sort of lied about her role with that to try and, pad up her CV to make it look like she should be Chancellor. So there's a big scandal around that as well. And then the other big scandal is that she had her parliamentary credit card removed because she was using it for personal use. So I would consider that fraud. That sounds like she defrauded the taxpayer as well by spending taxpayer money on her personal shit with her parliamentary credit card. Again, why is she Chancellor? Ridiculous. And then most people, in fairness, I don't think would consider this worthy of criticism, but in my opinion, it wholeheartedly is. She's just too emotionally weak a person to be in politics, especially at the high end. Perhaps her emotional frailty and weakness would be okay if she were just an MP and she weren't in such a front-facing role. But let's not forget, she broke down in tears on TV in front of the entire world because she was scared of losing her job. That is not acceptable from a politician on this scale. I do not care that she's had a hard time. I do not care that she's been under a lot of stress. If she can't hack it, she needs to get the Sorry, I shouldn't be swearing. Let's bleep that out, Ilias, my editor. She needs to get out of office because she is damaging and destroying the lives of millions of British people. So I don't care about her mental health or her state of mind. And if she isn't strong enough to just hold her stiff upper lip together, then she shouldn't be in power whatsoever. Now, what do we actually think is going to happen from this? Well, the BBC, put out this lovely little article here. How much trouble is Rachel Reeves in over the rental rule break? And it gives us a decent breakdown of what most people with this sort of legal literacy think is likely going to come from this. So here we are. Her failure to apply for a selective license before renting out her family home is at the very least embarrassing, but is it more than that? That's a question that can be answered on multiple levels: ethical, political, and legal. With ethics, basically they go on to say that she's required to abide by the ministerial code, and this is a breach of that ministerial code. Funnily enough, yes, Keir Starmer came out and said that he doesn't care that she broke the ministerial code, and that actually the ministerial code makes it clear that in certain circumstances, just an apology is sufficient when they break the ministerial code. I don't believe that whatsoever. She should be fired. The Conservative Party are obviously jumping on top of this a lot. Their only ability to garner any kind of positive press in the media right now is when Labour mess up. That they're not exactly a political force to be reckoned with at the moment, but as you see, they smell vulnerability. One rule for the Chancellor and another rule for everybody else. Keir Starmer pledged to restore integrity to politics, but now he's laughing in the face of the British public. He should grow a backbone and sack the Chancellor now. And Kemi Badenoch saying that she should be sacked only if she's found to have broken the law. I don't really see how that's even up for discussion. Now, the other big thing here is that, yes, because this was almost certainly illegal, she's probably going to end up with a fine here. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit larger than usual in this situation to try and, show that they're actually taking it seriously and to make a little bit of an example for her, especially considering how she's pushed for this legislation to come into place herself. The council has so far refused to comment on everything. What a surprise. They are a Labour-led council. And as you can see, last year, Southwark Council fined a letting agent and a landlord £1,100 and almost £2,500 for renting out a property without acquiring the correct licence. In total, fines totaling £2.5 million have been given out across the country for breaking this very specific rule. So I personally, considering how she made somewhere in the region of, I think £57,000 was the closer number, but just under £60,000 renting out her home illegally, I think she should be sacrificing at least 20 or 30% of that revenue in a fine here. So I'd like to see, a fine of £15,000 to £20,000, and I personally would be satisfied with that. Then there's the political judgment side of it. Yes, it's really, really bad. Obviously, it's bad. She's breaking the rules, and it's in the public eye, and everyone's paying attention to it, and they're not going to stop either. What's actually going to come next from this entire problem? Well, Starmer is backing her, and he has ruled out completely, no room for error, no room for interpretation here. He is not going to sack her, and he is not saying that she should resign from this whatsoever. To be clear, she should be sacked, right? This should have happened. Actually, she should have been sacked about a year ago when that CV fraud came to light, but she won't, and I do understand why. It's because it's too close to the budget, which is going to be the single most important political event of 2025, and replacing the Chancellor right now would cause chaos for Labour and even more chaos for the financial markets within the UK and the tax markets and our economy in general. So if they were to get rid of her, it would hurt Labour's polling more, and it would actually really, really damage the economy and the country. Yes, her budget's going to be bad, it's going to be tax raises, and it's going to make it poorer, the entire country, but it would be even worse if she's replaced with another brand new Chancellor that no one even knows, 3 weeks before that budget goes through, and then those tax cuts or tax raises, happen anyway. The real big political risk to this for Labour is that actually Labour have been trying to mount up and claim that they are a bastion of all that's good and right in the world, and that the Conservatives were all about sleaze and corruption, and that they've fixed everything. This here is a tweet from Keir Starmer back in 2022 when he was still in opposition. "You can't be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker. It's time for Tory MPs to tell Boris Johnson this has gone for too long. This was after the Partygate. Only then will dignity be restored in Downing Street." Well, yes, we've already had lots of law breaking. We've had corruption ministers sacked for corruption. We've had housing ministers sacked for breaking housing tax and dodging tax there. And now we've literally had someone in Downing Street, 11 Downing Street, but she's now been caught out basically dodging laws and avoiding paying for licenses and abiding by her laws. Now, what this does do that's a good thing for everyone, I think, is that it exposes how unfair the attacks on landlords by Labour have been. And in particular, I want to talk just a little bit about the new Renters' Rights Bill, which has just gone into effect. And to be clear here, I want to say I've split opinions on this. Or I don't have split opinions. I have one very, very firm opinion. This law is retarded, and it's going to send our country back, and it's going to make it really, really crap for landlords and for renters in the country. The reason I said I'm split a little bit is I am both a landlord and a renter. This flat I live in London. I don't buy in London. I don't want to pay, 100 grand in stamp duty or something, so I rent instead. I rent this place. I spend a lot of money on rent, and I've been a renter for the last few years, and I'm probably going to continue to rent in London for the next 5 years or so until I decide to move out into the country and buy a house. So in theory, I should benefit from a Renters' Rights Bill. And at the same time, I'm a landlord. I'm in the process of selling all of my properties because it's just an awful place to be a landlord in the United Kingdom. So in a year, I won't be a landlord anymore, but I am currently a landlord. And so I can see both sides of the Renters' Rights Bill, and I do understand what Labour are trying to do with this, but they are failing. Now, even the Chancellor is failing to act within the law, the legal system that we put together to try and regulate the rental system. And it proves that this legal system that is, governing this little industry is so convoluted and so difficult to follow that even the government themselves are getting it wrong. And not just a local MP who's a little bit irrelevant on the grand scheme of things, but probably the second most powerful person in the country, according to, typical political theory. Now, she's going to have tax advisors and assistants and all the other advisors and staff that she has to help. And if even she's making mistakes and accidentally missing out the fact that she needed a license to rent out her home, imagine how it's going to be for someone who works a full-time job and then they just, inherited a house from a passed away parent or something, and now they're renting it out because they don't want to sell it, or they've just worked really hard, built a business, made some money, and they've put that money into a buy-to-let. Imagine how much harder it's going to be for them to stay on the right side of the law, considering how they're going to have no time and none of the support system that someone like Rachel Reeves is going to have. So yes, it's going to be a little bit of a nightmare for landlords going forward. That's why I'm stopping being a landlord, and that's going to be bad for renters as well. And I want to give a very specific example of this, in particular talking about the Renters' Rights Bill and how one of these laws has been changed. Here we are. So I searched here, Renters' Rights Bill, landlords can't accept any higher offers. And this is one of the new parts of the legislation that's just been put into place. So the new Renters' Rights Act in England prohibits landlords and agents from accepting offers higher than the advertised rent, trying to effectively end rental bidding wars. Landlords have to advertise a fixed rent, and it is illegal for them to invite, encourage, or accept a higher offer. Tenants cannot be asked for a higher rent than what is advertised, but if a tenant voluntarily offers more, the landlord may be able to accept it. Now, let me be perfectly clear. This will cause landlords to simply put the properties, the prices up higher in the first place, right? A landlord can't accept an offer that's lower than what they've advertised it at, but they can accept, they can accept something lower than what they've advertised it at, but they can't accept something higher. So say a landlord used to rent their house for £2,000 a month out. In the past, they would just list it for £2,000, and maybe 3 families are looking for a place at the same time, and one of them really, really wants it more than the others because it's got a big garden and they've got 4 big dogs. They're going to offer a little bit more, and maybe they offer a little bit more, they end up paying £2,200 a month. The person who wanted the house most got it, and the landlord gets rewarded for taking care of the garden and make it a nice house that people actually want, and he rents it out for an extra £200 a month. Nowadays, under this new law, the landlord is going to know that, I could get someone probably to pay maybe $2,200, but I'd list it at $2,000 ideally. This time round, because I'm not allowed to accept more than $2,000 if I list it at that, I'm just going to list it at $2,500. And then those 3 families that want the house, they can still compete against each other. And maybe 2 of them are going to offer $2,000, that price I originally wanted, whilst the other one's still going to offer $2,200. So I'm not going to make any less money from this. But now the landlords are incentivized to list property prices higher than market rates, which will anchor people's expectations and make people more likely to accept those higher rents. And this law will literally make it more expensive to rent across the entirety of England. It is one of those examples of externalities with government policy where they try and fix a problem, and in reality they just make it worse with legislation because they don't really understand how the world works. It's not going to go well, and this is seen all across all the legislation that is there to try and punish landlords and supposedly help renters, right? I used to be, I still am a landlord. Soon enough, I will no longer be a landlord. I'm selling those places not to other landlords, because there are no other landlords, to people who want to buy. Now that's great. It's going to push down property prices for people wanting to buy, but when there are fewer rental properties on the market, rents go up. It is simple supply and demand. So if you are stuck renting because you live somewhere like London, like me, and you don't want to pay $100,000 out of pocket in tax just to buy a bloody house, well, guess what? You are going to suffer from the Renters' Rights Act over the next few years until, hopefully reform come into power and they can get rid of it and go forward. The final thing I want to say about this is I think it actually exposes how local government in particular, the scandal that is, not the Renters' Rights Bill, Renters' Rights Act. I think that this Rachel Reeves scandal exposes how local government is irrelevant and a nuisance and really doesn't serve much purpose and has expanded far beyond their original remit, and they hurt our country, right? I genuinely don't think that Reeves, renting out her family home after moving into the official residence for the Chancellor is bad. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's fine. I also don't really think that not paying £900 to a local council to get a licence, which isn't going to actually improve standards of local renting places anyway, from the local council is actually bad. What's bad is that Labour have forced these rules onto everyone else and yet somehow failed to follow them themselves. And again, these rules, all it does is it makes it more expensive to rent out a home, which means renters pay more because the landlords just pass that cost on to them, right? And so they are forcing landlords to add to their costs, to their administration for literally zero gain, with complicated rules that cause even honest actors to break the law accidentally and now become illegal landlords and operate in that sort of grey market where they can't be tracked at all. This is an awful idea, but councils in general are awful and they need complete reform as well. The level of democratic activity within council elections is atrocious, and that alone is a reason to get rid of them, because in reality, 10-15% of the population control everything about local council policy. We would have to, run a sort of election system where it happens in tandem at the same time as a general election to try and get that voting rate up to make it actually democratic. And then even then, these councils were just drunk with power. And over the last few years, I might make a video about this in the future. Councils have had legal obligations forced upon them so that they have no choice but to keep raising more and more money in council tax, because if they don't provide certain services, which they shouldn't be providing in the first place, then they're breaking the law. One of them, for instance, is ensuring that kids can get to school, independent of what their parents can provide. Personally, I think that you are responsible for your own children, and that actually the council should not be spending £500 a week in some cases sending a single child to school. I'm not talking about, paying for the teacher and the schoolroom and the chairs and the whiteboards and the facilities. I'm talking about just getting them a taxi to school there and back every day. £500 a week some kids are costing local councils because the parents can't be bothered to do it themselves, and they claim that they've got anxiety or something else. Absolutely ridiculous. Local councils, local governments are always awful because they are not representative and they're filled with people who end up getting drunk on power. But unfortunately, that is the way our democracy is set up at the moment. Anyway, once again, relatively new channel. If you are new to the channel, leave me a subscribe, a comment, a like. Tell me if you liked this video, if you didn't. I didn't do much preparation for this video in advance. Usually I spend a lot more time, thinking out what I'm going to say and planning it out a little bit more so it's a little bit more coherent. This was a lot more just off the cusp. If you liked that, tell me. If you didn't, tell me as well. And I will just take your advice and your critiques and your criticisms. I love constructive criticism, and I'm going to work to make this channel really, really enjoyable so that you guys enjoy this content. You come back and watch more, we reach more people, and hopefully we can, start getting some public attention towards some things that need changing, and hopefully get rid of the uni party, which has destroyed this country that we all love so dearly. Cheers.